Raising Tanner alone wasn't what I had planned, but life rarely goes according to plan. His father, Derek, was 20 years older than me, a man stuck in his ways, rooted in traditions that felt more like chains than guidance. When Tanner was born, I knew I'd have to be both mother and father to him, and so I was. From the moment he could walk, I took him everywhere with me: hockey games, baseball games, amusement parks. If I was going somewhere, he was by my side. I wanted him to see the world through eyes that weren't dulled by outdated ideas. Derek had opinions about how a boy should be raised, but I had no interest in making Tanner into a replica of his father. I wanted him to be good, kind, strong in ways that mattered, and I think I succeeded. Tanner grew into a young man with a heart too big for his chest, always looking out for people, always making sure I was okay. Maybe it was because it had been just the two of us for so long, but we understood each other without needing many words. He was 18 now, taller than me by a full head, with Derek's sharp jaw but my eyes. Soft, warm, always watching. "You ready, Mom?" Tanner called from the hallway, already in his Bruins hoodie, ready for the game. "Give me 5 minutes," I called back, slipping on my jacket. Hockey had always been our thing, a tradition we never missed. He grinned when I finally emerged, shaking his head. "Took you long enough. Patience is a virtue," I teased, nudging him as we walked out the door. At the arena, we fell into the same rhythm we always had: cheering, yelling at bad calls, sharing a basket of fries. But as the game went on, I found myself looking at him more than the ice. When had he grown up? The boy who used to tug at my hand, asking for ice cream, was now a man, elbows propped on his knees, eyes trained on the game, the flickering lights casting shadows across his face. "You okay?" he asked, catching me staring. Smiled. "Yeah, just thinking." He didn't press. He never did. But later that night, as we drove home in the quiet hum of the car, he spoke. "You know, I don't say it enough, but thanks." "For what?" "For everything." His voice was softer now, almost hesitant. "For always being there. For never making me feel like I was missing something." My throat tightened. "You were never missing anything, Tanner." He nodded, gripping the wheel a little tighter. "I know." And in that moment, I realized something. Maybe I had been so busy trying to make sure Tanner had a good life that I had forgotten to make one for myself. Tanner pulled the car into the driveway, the soft hum of the engine fading as he shifted into park. Neither of us moved right away. The moment in the car, the quiet understanding between us, felt too big to just brush off. "I mean it, Mom," he said, turning toward me, his expression open, raw. "I don't know what I would have done without you." A lump formed in my throat, but I refused to let it settle. I reached across the center console and pulled him into a hug. At first, it was just a hug like any other. Warm, familiar, a place of comfort. But then, something shifted. Maybe it was the way Tanner held on a second longer than usual, or the way my heartbeat suddenly felt too loud. His arms were strong around me, solid and sure, and for the briefest moment I forgot where we were. I pulled away first, clearing my throat. "Let's get inside," I said, forcing a small laugh. "It's freezing." Tanner hesitated, but nodded, and we stepped into the house, the air between us charged with something unspoken. The next afternoon, Tanner knocked on my bedroom door. "Hey, you busy?" I looked up from my laptop. "Not really. What's up?" He hesitated in the doorway, hands in the pockets of his hoodie, a rare uncertainty on his face. I need your advice on something." That was new. Tanner had always been independent, figuring things out on his own. He walked in and sat on the edge of my bed, exhaling before speaking. "There's this girl from college. We've been talking a lot, and I think I want to ask her out." Something inside me clenched at those words, but I ignored it. "That's great, honey," I said, keeping my voice light. "What's she like?" "She's nice, funny, really smart." He rubbed the back of his neck. I just, I don't know how to act. I don't want to come off as awkward, you know? I want to make a good impression." I smiled, relieved by a topic I could actually help with. "Well, first of all, just be yourself. Girls appreciate honesty." "Yeah, but what do I even talk about?" He groaned, flopping onto his back. "I feel like I'll just sit there like an idiot." I laughed. "That's why you keep the conversation flowing. Ask her about herself, what she likes, what makes her happy. Pay attention, contact, and most importantly, relax." Tanner turned his head toward me. His expression shifted, thoughtful. "What if we practice?" "Practice?" "Yeah." He sat up again, like a pretend date. "You could play the role of the girl, and I'll try to act natural." The request caught me off guard, but it was harmless enough. Just another way I was helping him, like I always had. "All right," I agreed, setting my laptop aside. "Let's do it right." That evening, we went out. Tanner insisted on doing everything like a real date. Holding doors open, pulling out my chair at the restaurant, even paying the bill despite my protests. It felt ridiculous at first, playing pretend, but soon I found myself enjoying it. We laughed easily, slipping into the comfortable rhythm we always had, but with something different. A new kind of energy. A playfulness that felt exciting in a way I hadn't expected. At one point, Tanner leaned forward on his elbows, eyes locked on mine. "You know, this is actually kind of fun." "It is," I admitted, swirling my wine glass. "You're good at this," he said. "It doesn't even feel like practice." The way he looked at me then, it was different. Warm intent. My stomach fluttered. I ignored it. By the time we got home, something between us had shifted again. "This helped," Tanner said as he shut the car door. "I feel more confident now." Smiled. "I'm glad." He hesitated, then suddenly pulled me into another hug. And just like the night before, something lingered in the air between us. Something neither of us could name, but both of us could feel. It was impossible, but it was real. I never meant for it to go this far. At first, I had told myself it was nothing. Just a harmless pull, a trick of the mind born out of familiarity and the easy warmth of companionship. But there was nothing easy about the way Tanner looked at me. Nothing harmless about the way my pulse quickened when he stood too close. The night he confessed everything, I had felt the ground shift beneath me. The truth that there was no college girl, that he had only made her up to get closer to me, should have made me angry. Instead, I had felt something far more dangerous. Relief. Because deep down, I had known. I had seen the way his eyes lingered too long when he thought I wasn't paying attention. The way his voice softened when he said my name. I'd felt it too. I should have shut it down immediately. I should have told him that whatever he was feeling was a mistake, a passing infatuation, something he would outgrow. But the problem was I couldn't lie to him. Not about this. I'd been fighting it too. And so, when he asked me to meet him outside the city, away from prying eyes, I went. The first time we barely spoke. The crisp autumn air wrapped around us as we walked along a narrow dirt trail, the sky shifting from deep blue to dusky violet. Tanner kept his hands in his pockets, shoulders tense, his mouth pressed into a thin line. I kept a careful distance, afraid that even the smallest brush of his arm against mine would shatter whatever control I had left. It was only when we reached the crest of the hill, when we stood in the silence of the fading day, that he spoke. "You don't have to feel guilty," he said, his voice rough. I let out a quiet breath, my gaze fixed on the horizon. "I should," I whispered. "I should feel guilty, but I don't." I felt him shift beside me, turning to face me. The weight of his stare was unbearable, and yet I couldn't bring myself to move away. "You think I don't know how impossible this is," he murmured. "I tried to fight it, Lily. I really did. But I can't." His words sent a tremor through me. I closed my eyes, inhaling sharply as I tried to steady myself. This was dangerous, reckless, and yet, standing here with him, wrapped in the quiet, in the golden light of the setting sun, it felt more real than anything had in a long time. "You don't have to say anything," Tanner continued, his voice softer now. "I just need you to know that it's real, that it's not going away." I exhaled slowly, my chest tightening. This wasn't just some infatuation, some fleeting attraction that would burn itself out. It was something deeper, something that had been building long before either of us had been willing to acknowledge it. And I didn't want it to go away. For weeks we kept meeting like this. Secret walks through hidden trails, stolen moments that felt like existed outside of time. Sometimes we spoke about nothing at all. Other times we said everything without speaking at all. Every step I took beside him felt like another thread unraveling, another boundary blurring between what was right and what I couldn't deny any longer. One evening, as the sky burned red and gold, Tanner stopped suddenly. I turned to him, confused. His eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. "I can't keep pretending I don't want to touch you." My heart slammed against my ribs. "Tanner." "I won't," he interrupted, shaking his head. "Not unless you ask me to." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. The air between us was thick, charged with something electric and dangerous. He was waiting for me to decide. And that was the worst part, because I wanted him to. I shouldn't have let him kiss me. That was the thought that haunted me in the quiet moments, when the world was still and there was nothing to drown out the pounding of my own heart. But then I would remember the way it felt, the way his lips found mine with a certainty that sent fire racing through my veins, and I knew there was no stopping this. Had started with something small, a lingering touch when he brushed a stray hair from my face, the way his fingers hesitated just a second too long against my skin. And then, one evening, as the sky turned dark and we stood alone in the quiet of the woods, he finally closed the space between us. His lips were warm, his hands steady as they cradled my face, as if he had been waiting for this moment for far too long. And maybe he had. Maybe we both had. I should have pulled away. Instead, I melted into him. The moment was slow, deliberate, like neither of us wanted to break whatever spell had fallen over us. His hand slid down to my waist, pulling me closer, and I let him. My body answered before my mind could catch up, my fingers gripping the front of his jacket, anchoring myself to him. When we finally broke apart, our breaths mingled in the cool night air. His forehead rested against mine, his hands still holding me close. "I'm sorry," Tanner whispered, though he didn't sound sorry at all. I swallowed hard, my hands still fisted in his jacket. "No, you're not." His lips twitched into the smallest smile. "No," he admitted, his voice low. "I'm not." I let out a shaky breath, stepping back before I did something reckless. Something more reckless than what had already happened. My heart was racing, my mind struggling to catch up with what we had just done. Tanner watched me carefully, as if he was afraid I might take it all back, pretend it hadn't happened. But I couldn't do that. I didn't want to. From that moment on, everything changed. The stolen walks became longer, the touches more frequent. He would find excuses to brush his fingers against mine, to stand a little too close. And I let him, 'cause I wanted him to. There was something dangerous in the way he made me feel, like I was waking up for the first time in years, like I had been walking through my life in a fog, and only now could see clearly. One evening, as we sat on the hood of his car, staring up at the stars, Tanner turned to me, his expression unreadable. "This isn't just a game to me," he said, his voice quiet but firm. I met his gaze, my chest tightening. "I know." He exhaled slowly, his fingers tracing small circles on my knee. "I don't want to hide it." My stomach twisted. "Tanner, we don't have a choice." His jaw clenched, frustration flickering across his face. "But why?" "Because this isn't normal." My voice was barely above a whisper, but the weight of the words was crushing. "Because if people find out—" "I don't care what people think," he interrupted, sighed, looking away. "You say that now, but I've loved you for months, Lily." His voice was raw, full of something that made my breath itch. "You think I haven't thought about what this means? What it could cost?" I swallowed hard, my hands twisting in my lap. "I don't regret it," he murmured, reaching for my hand. "Not a single second of it." His fingers tangled with mine, warm and solid, and so utterly certain. And maybe that was the scariest part of all, because I didn't regret it either. I told myself this wouldn't last, that it was just a fleeting moment, something born from the secrecy, the thrill of stolen time. But with every touch, every kiss, I knew I was lying to myself. Tanner consumed me. We started meeting at my apartment, a place that had once felt empty, filled only with the distant memories of my parents. Now it was different. Now it smelled like him. His cologne lingering in the air, the faint scent of his jacket draped over the back of my couch. It became our world, separate from everything else. Here, there were no hushed conversations, no nervous glances over our shoulders. Just Tanner and me, tangled up in a dangerous, beautiful mess. First, we tried to pretend it was nothing. We would joke, tease, keep things light. He would chase me around the kitchen, trying to steal a kiss, while I dodged him with laughter. I would sit on the windowsill, watching the city lights while he stood behind me, his arms wrapping around my waist, his lips brushing the back of my neck. It was playful, it was dangerous, and it was everything. Tanner never talked about the future. I think he knew better than to ask. For him, this was enough. Just being with me, just having these moments, even if they weren't promised beyond the walls of my apartment. But I wasn't sure how much longer I could pretend. One night, as we lay side by side, his arm draped over my waist, I turned to him. His eyes were already on me, dark and unreadable. "What happens when this isn't enough anymore?" I whispered. His fingers traced lazy patterns on my skin. "Is it not enough for you now?" I hesitated. That wasn't what I meant, and he knew it. But Tanner had a way of avoiding the things he didn't want to face. I just, I sighed, pressing my forehead against his chest. We can't keep doing this forever. He stiffened slightly, but his voice was steady when he spoke. Why not? I pulled back, looking at him. Because one day, you'll want more. You'll want a real relationship. Someone you can take out to dinner. Someone you don't have to hide. His jaw clenched. You think I care about that? Tanner? No. He sat up, running a hand through his hair. You keep talking like this is temporary. Like it's just something that's going to burn out. But it's not. Not for me. I swallowed hard, my chest tightening. I love you, Lily. His voice was raw, his eyes pleading. And I don't care if we have to keep it a secret. I don't care if the rest of the world doesn't understand. You're all I want. I felt my heart break a little at his words, because I wanted to believe him. I wanted to pretend that love alone was enough to hold this together. But love didn't change the world. Love didn't erase the consequences. I reached for his hand, squeezing it tight. I love you too, I whispered. And it was the truth. But love wasn't always enough. And one day he would see that too.